We return to Nintendo Power Retrospectives with issue 111, the 111st issue for August of 1998. We have a bunch of things to cover this issue, including, well, a bunch of N64 games. This issue also has the first in the series of Pokemon inserts that I'll cover in one whack later. But for now, let's get started. Our cover game this issue is Bomberman Hero, which is not the title that Yoshi P worked on. Lots of general Nintendo flattery in the letters column this issue, though to be fair, at this point you are less likely to be writing to Nintendo Power if you're not a Nintendo fan. The PlayStation has had a much bigger install rate at this point, and so a lot more people there. PC gaming's on the upswing, a lot more people reading PC Gamer, Computer Gaming World. So, not be surprised where if you're still subscribed to Nintendo Power during the N64 era, you are, I'm not going to say a Nintendo zealot, but you are more down for whatever Nintendo's putting forward. In the Power charts, NBA Courtside, Banjo-Kazooie, and Mortal Kombat 4 entered the charts. We have our next big 3D Bomberman game with Bomberman Hero, with tips on game mechanics and notes on the first few worlds. Bomberman Hero's core problem is Bomberman is a game that works best when you are moving on the four main axes, up, down, left, and right. And Bomberman Hero is all about moving in full 360 degrees of movement, which makes it a real pain to place or aim if you're throwing them or kicking them, your bombs, and judging your blast radius, and so on. It just makes the game kind of messy to play, and I think that loses a lot of what makes Bomberman fun. We continue our coverage for NBA Courtside, or rather Kobe Bryant in NBA Courtside, with a whole bunch of tips from the game testers and developers on how to succeed. Next up is GT64 Championship Edition, which is another racing game for the N64, this one based on the GT Racing series, particularly the Japanese All Japan GT Championship rather than the World Driver Championship. Now, the guide itself has some maps of the tracks and tips on how to be a better racing driver. Near as I can tell, the tracks in the game aren't based on any real tracks. I could be wrong. Feel free to correct me in the comments. Not to put too fine a point on it, but the car handling in GT64 Championship Edition is squirrely as hell. I could never really get a good grip on what kind of racing line I was supposed to be keeping, nor could I really get a proper handle on my acceleration. It felt like the gas or the brakes were either all the way on or all the way off, with no way to properly lift off the gas to reduce acceleration by varying your pressure on the button or that sort of thing, or by kind of double pressing on gas and brakes. That combined with the draw distance made the game deeply unpleasant to play because, honestly, corners would pop up way faster than I would normally expect. We have a preview of Turok 2 with a lot of focus on the new tech in the game, from lighting to particle effects to draw distance to death animations. In classified information, we get a code to unlock Nakaruru for King of Fighters 95 for the Game Boy. Now, you know what's new and exciting in 1998? The Internet! Here's info on all of Nintendo's websites, and some, though certainly not all, of these URLs even still work. Near as I can tell, the ones that don't work don't appear to, as of this recording, steer you to any sort of malware-infested hellscapes, but access those URLs at your own discretion. We have a golf game for the N64 with Waialae Country Club. We have a bunch of info on play mechanics and pictures of the course. Waialae is a country club. It's a solid golf game, though its click wheel is weirdly a 2-click instead of a 3-click. Once to start and once to stop, once you've hit the right power, with no third tap to try and get the meter in the sweet spot. The game is still fine, but I find myself definitely missing the third tap. Now, I'm not great at the game, but I feel like the ways in which that I'm not great at the game are representative of the ways that I am not great at the actual real-world game of golf, which I would consider a point in the game's favor. We have an interview with Shigeru Miyamoto discussing Legend of Zelda: The Ocarina of Time and what to expect with the new game. There's a new Formula 1 game this issue with F1 World Grand Prix with then current teams, some of which modern fans be familiar with, like classic staples like Ferrari, Williams, and McLaren, and some less familiar teams like Benetton and Arrows, and also no Red Bull present. We have pictures of the tracks with some familiar faces on the course like Imola, and ones that aren't on the calendar in the 2020s like the Nürburgring. F1 World Grand Prix has some of the same handling problems that I had earlier with GT64, and I've come to realize is intrinsic to controllers around this time. Or at least the N64 controller. I don't recall this being as much of an issue, for example, on the PlayStation controller with Gran Turismo. Specifically, acceleration and braking is fundamentally analog. You are either slamming down the gas pedal to the floor or you're not, and the same applies for the brakes. It has the mixed finesse of cornering on some of these tracks messy to the point that I'm, in this footage, drifting around corners in a Formula 1 car, which is not how you corner in a Formula 1 car. If you're drifting, you're doing something wrong because it's not good for the tires for the sustained length of a race. Now, if I was the kind of sicko that had an N64 compatible racing wheel, which also worked, this would probably be less of an issue. But I'm not that kind of sicko, and neither were most N64 owners at the time. I'll look for a game that feels a little too frustrating to handle, and with GT64 and this, it makes for a problem where you've got, at this point, Gran Turismo on the PlayStation, which is a racing game that also works just fine on a controller, and a simulationist game at that. But the simulationist games that we're getting on the N64 don't feel like they work as well on the N64's controller. Next up is Flying Dragon, which is a sort of hybrid fighting game from Natsume. And we have some notes of play mechanics, but not characters. Now, while the game gets a review in the Now Playing, from what I can tell, it doesn't actually come out for a couple of months, so I'm going to put off the review for later. New version of International Superstar Soccer for 98 with a new scenario-based gameplay mode where you're put in a scenario with one of two teams and have to get out of it. Now, playing a proper soccer match, not necessarily going with the scenarios, for International Superstar Soccer generally plays fairly well, though it runs into problems with, well, not being able to quickly pull up the controls during play easily, at least not that I could tell. And considering how the controls change when on offense and defense, this makes things rather frustrating. Soccer games aren't particularly my thing, so I can't speak for how this one fares, but in all, it feels like it plays the controls pretty well. Even with my lineup here of USA versus Scotland, while I lost to this game, I didn't lose by a landslide, which is normally the sign of when you have messy controls or an unbalanced AI. Gex is now on the N64 with Gex 64, and Nintendo Power has to awkwardly acknowledge that yes, in fact, this is a port. However, it's not quite ready to ship yet, so we're not covering it yet. In Counselor's Corner, we have tips on how to unlock battle mode in Forsaken 64. Spoilers, you need a memory card for this, at least if you want to access it again later. We've got the Game Boy version of WWF Warzone with the roster and the full move list, and yes, the game is still using the control structure that was used for the full console versions, where you have to use fighting game style controller movements to do anything, which was my biggest objection for the console title, only now you're doing it on a smaller screen with sprites with less detail, and also no creator wrestler, so this is a case where from a raw feature standpoint, the game suffers, so I'm giving this a miss. The Now Playing column no also ran, so we have some late releases, like we're talking about Wet Tricks again here as it has finally come out. In Pak Watch, Ogre Battle 64 is on its way, and we get a weird update for Robotech Kisto Dreams, which, one, has them saying that it's still potentially on its way out. No, it never comes out. And two, Nintendo Power confuses it with Battletech, which is something that Pass Illegal would not be happy with. If you don't know why, go look up Battletech and the Unseen on the internet. This issue's pick is Waialae Country Club. Waialae appreciate being able to drive with classic drivers on older configurations of long beloved tracks in F1 World Grand Prix. Handling the game is rough, even on lower difficulties, and Bomberman Hero as a platformer, as a 3D platformer, doesn't work right, honestly, for what I want, what I expect and want out of a Bomberman game. The 3D elements don't quite work in the game's favor there. Next month, we're covering more F-Zero X, which I've already reviewed, so there's going to be some other stuff in that issue, and we'll get to talk about that then.
Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe. And also consider backing my Patreon. Patreon backers get episodes up to 1 week early of this show and any future Let's Plays. Also, please consider backing my Ko-fi. Toss me a few bucks also helps support the show, and it's not a monthly obligation or anything like that.